Все начинается с ощущения абсолютной нормальности, с привычного ритма жизни, который мы привыкли не замечать. Представьте себе огромный круизный лайнер, рассекающий холодные воды Атлантики. Тысячи людей, объединенных стремлением к отдыху и новым впечатлениям, проводят дни в окружении роскоши, морских пейзажей и размеренного шума двигателей. Это воплощение безопасности, замкнутая экосистема, где каждый шаг предусмотрен, а любая потребность мгновенно удовлетворяется. Но именно в этой стерильной, контролируемой среде зародилось нечто, что невозможно было увидеть или предугадать. Тишина океана, которая раньше казалась умиротворяющей, начала приобретать иной, зловещий оттенок. Никто не мог подумать, что обычная остановка на побережье Аргентины станет отправной точкой для цепочки событий, которые превратят праздник в изоляцию. Первые сигналы были настолько незначительными, что на них никто не обратил внимания. Легкое недомогание, списываемое на морскую болезнь или простую усталость от перелетов. Однако вскоре обыденность была нарушена первым серьезным инцидентом. 70-летний пассажир, еще вчера наслаждавшийся ужином, внезапно почувствовал резкое ухудшение состояния. Больница на борту, обычно пустующая, внезапно стала центром тревоги. Состояние мужчины ухудшалось с пугающей скоростью, оставляя врачей в замешательстве. Когда он скончался прямо на борту судна, по коридорам лайнера прополз первый холодный шепот страха. Это не было похоже на обычную инфекцию, которую можно купировать антибиотиками. Это было нечто иное, скрытое глубоко в организме, действующее методично и безжалостно. Окружающее пространство, еще недавно казавшееся дружелюбным, внезапно стало враждебным. Каждая поверхность, каждый дверной проем и даже самый чистый морской воздух теперь вызывали подозрения. В замкнутом пространстве корабля, посреди открытого моря, люди начали осознавать свою уязвимость. Тревожные новости начали просачиваться из кают. Жена первого погибшего также почувствовала себя плохо. Это уже не выглядело как трагическая случайность или индивидуальная реакция организма. В воздухе повис немой вопрос, который никто не решался произнести вслух. Враг был невидим, он находился совсем рядом, возможно, в соседней каюте или в общем зале, но никто не знал его имени и того, как от него защититься. Интрига нарастала с каждым часом, пока лайнер продолжал свой путь, становясь плавучей тюрьмой для тех, кто оказался внутри. Обычные радости круиза, совместные обеды, прогулки по палубе сменились осторожностью и подозрительностью. Люди начали замечать, что знакомый мир изменился. Привычные вещи стали источником опасности, а каждый контакт с окружающими казался потенциальной ловушкой. Это было ощущение тихой опасности, когда угроза не кричит о себе, а медленно и верно затягивает петлю, не оставляя шанса на побег. Все понимали, что-то пошло не так, и обычная жизнь уже не будет прежней, пока этот невидимый враг остается на борту. The mystery begins to unravel not in a high-tech laboratory, but in the most mundane and overlooked of places, a visit to a landfill on the outskirts of an Argentinian port. Imagine the scene where birdwatchers and nature enthusiasts, seeking the beauty of the wild, stepped unknowingly into a microscopic minefield. This is how the biological trap is set. It does not require a direct encounter, a bite, or a visible wound. The danger is far more pervasive and ethereal. It exists in the very air, in the fine, invisible dust that rises from the parched ground, carrying microscopic particles of waste that have dried under the southern sun. A single breath, a casual touch of a contaminated hand to a face, or the simple act of walking through an area where nature has reclaimed the refuse of human civilization, can seal a person's fate. The pathogen is incredibly resilient, lying in wait in the soil and the debris, surviving in a state of suspended animation until it finds a warm, living host. Once inhaled, these invisible particles settle deep within the pulmonary tissues, beginning a silent, internal countdown that no one on that ship could have initially perceived or predicted. The true insidiousness of this threat lies in its agonizingly long and deceptive timeline. The incubation period is a terrifying biological window, lasting anywhere from 1 week to as long as 2 full months. During this extensive period, the infected individual feels perfectly healthy, possessing no inkling of the storm brewing within. They walk the decks, share meals with their families, and participate in the vibrant social life of the ship, completely unaware that a lethal force is multiplying within their cells. There are no warning signs, no early fevers, and no physiological tells. It is a ghost in the machine of the human body. This period of normalcy creates a dangerous false sense of security, allowing the travelers to continue their journey across the vast ocean, effectively carrying a hidden cargo that no customs agent or thermal scanner could ever detect. By the time the first real symptoms emerge, the biological damage is often already far advanced, and the window for effective medical intervention has begun to close with a thud when the ailment finally decides to manifest. It does so with a sudden violence that catches even the most experienced medical professionals off guard. What starts as a seemingly harmless fatigue or a slight muscle ache rapidly escalates into a full-scale assault on the vital systems of the body. The progression is not measured in days, but often in a matter of terrifying hours. Patients who were walking and talking in the morning can find themselves in acute respiratory distress or facing total organ failure by sunset. This rapid decline is what makes the situation so desperate for the ship's medical staff. They find themselves fighting an enemy they cannot see and whose rules they are only beginning to comprehend. Standard medical protocols fail, and common treatments prove frustratingly ineffective. The medical tension on board reaches a breaking point as doctors realize they are not dealing with a typical seasonal infection, but with a highly lethal pathogen that exploits the very intimacy of human life. What makes this specific situation even more frightening is the unique and rare nature of how this particular strain interacts with the human population. While most similar threats in the natural world reach a dead end once they infect a person, this version has found a way to bridge the biological gap. In the confined and communal environment of a cruise liner, where people spend prolonged periods in close contact, breathing the same air and sharing small enclosed spaces, the biological trap becomes even more effective. It is no longer just about the initial contact with the environment in a distant port. It is now about the person standing directly next to you. The realization that a family member or a fellow traveler could become a source of danger adds a layer of psychological horror to the physical threat. This is the ultimate hallmark of a biological trap. It turns our most basic human needs for connection and community into the very instruments of our potential destruction. As the ship moves toward its next destination, the invisible enemy is no longer just in the dust of a distant land. It is inside the very heartbeat of the vessel, moving through the hallways, and living in the breath of the unsuspecting. The veil of uncertainty has finally been lifted, revealing a name that resonates with dread among epidemiologists and health officials worldwide: hantavirus. More specifically, we are looking at the Andes strain, a particularly lethal variant of this viral family. While the world has become accustomed to respiratory threats, this is a different class of pathogen entirely. This is not a new or unknown entity, but its appearance in such a confined and mobile environment as a cruise ship has sent shockwaves through the global health community. The outbreak, centered on the vessel MV Hondas, has moved from a localized concern to an international investigation. What we are witnessing is the unfolding of a clinical nightmare that began in the wilderness of South America and has now been carried across the Atlantic. 8 cases have been officially reported, and the statistics are chilling. 3 deaths among those few infections. Of the 8, 5 have been definitively confirmed as the Andes virus, marking a critical moment where scientific theory meets a tragic reality. The mechanism by which this virus ravages the human body is nothing short of devastating. Unlike common flus that irritate the upper respiratory tract, the Andes Hantavirus targets the very core of our breathing apparatus. It triggers what is known as hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a condition where the virus attacks the lining of the capillaries in the lungs. As the immune system attempts to fight back, these tiny blood vessels become porous, leaking plasma directly into the air sacs. The victim essentially begins to drown from within, their lungs filling with their own bodily fluids as the oxygen exchange comes to a grinding halt. It is a rapid, catastrophic failure of the most vital system in the body. This is why the medical community is sounding the alarm with such intensity. This isn't just a severe cold. It is a biological assault that carries a staggering mortality rate of approximately 40%. In simple, terrifying terms, 4 out of every 10 people who contract this specific strain will not survive. This level of lethality is what distinguishes this outbreak from the pandemics the world has recently navigated, turning every confirmed case into a high-stakes battle for survival. What has turned this specific outbreak into a global point of interest is the rare and frightening ability of the Andes strain to do what almost no other hantavirus can: transmit directly from one human to another. Traditionally, hantaviruses are considered dead-end infections in humans, meaning the virus stops with the first person infected. However, the Andes variant is the exception to the rule, capable of spreading through close and prolonged contact between people. This is the reason for the intense scrutiny of the MV Hondas. The timeline of the infection shows a clear and troubling path. After the initial passenger died in early April, the infection claimed his wife, followed by more passengers as the ship docked in St. Helena and eventually headed toward the Canary Islands. The virus was no longer confined to a single source in Argentina. It was moving with the people, traveling through the ship's social structures. Cases have now been tracked to South Africa, where a patient was medically evacuated, and as far as Switzerland, where a passenger tested positive after flying home. The geography of the threat is expanding, and with it, the necessity for a deep understanding of how this ancient enemy operates in our modern, interconnected world. The alarm raised by organizations like the World Health Organization is rooted in this unique capacity for human-to-human transmission within confined spaces. While health experts are quick to point out that the reproduction number, or R rate, remains below 1, meaning the virus is unlikely to explode into a global wildfire, the sheer deadliness of each individual case demands a total mobilization of resources. This is the climax of the report, where the gravity of the situation becomes undeniable. We are looking at a pathogen that kills nearly half of those it infects, moving silently through a population of travelers who are now scattered across different continents. The urgency is not about mass lockdowns or societal shutdowns, but about the clinical reality of a virus that strikes with surgical precision and lethal force. The story of the MV Hondas is a stark reminder that even in our era of advanced medicine, there are biological forces that can still render us powerless if we fail to recognize their presence and respect their power. To truly understand the gravity of the situation on the MV Hondas, we must look closer at the biological portrait of this ancient enemy. Hantavirus is not a product of the modern age or a laboratory mutation. It is a primal force of nature that has existed for millennia, co-evolving with the smallest inhabitants of our wilderness. This virus belongs to a family of pathogens that have claimed human lives long before we had the technology to name them. Its natural reservoir is found in various species of rodents, specifically the long-tailed pygmy rice rat, in the case of the Andes strain. These animals act as silent factories for the virus, carrying it in their systems without ever showing signs of illness themselves. The virus lives in a state of perfect harmony with its host, shed continuously through the animal's saliva, urine, and droppings. When these materials dry, the virus becomes part of the dust, waiting for a human to disturb it. This is why the danger is so pervasive in rural settings, barns, or even, as seen in this case, a seemingly harmless visit to a bird-watching site near a landfill. The environmental resilience of the hantavirus is a key component of its survival strategy. It is a master of the biological weight, capable of remaining infectious in the environment for days or even weeks under the right conditions. It thrives in cool, shaded areas, hidden from the ultraviolet rays of the sun that would otherwise break down its delicate lipid envelope. This durability is what allows the virus to bridge the gap between the wild and the human world. In the context of the cruise ship, the virus found an ideal environment, a controlled climate with countless surfaces and constant human movement. Once the virus enters a human host, it transitions from a dormant environmental particle into a high-speed biological weapon. The scientific data gathered over decades shows us that while we have mapped its genome and understand its structure, we are still largely at the mercy of its efficiency once it takes hold of the human respiratory system. Historically, our modern awareness of hantavirus began to sharpen in the late 20th century. Between 1993 and 2003, nearly 900 cases were recorded in the United States alone, with a staggering 35% of those resulting in death. Most of those instances were isolated, involving individuals who had come into contact with rodent-infested areas in the American Southwest. However, the Andes strain recorded in the current outbreak represents a more complex evolutionary path. It is the only known species of hantavirus capable of jumping from person to person. This biological bridge is what elevates the Andes virus from a rural hazard to a significant public health concern. Despite this capability, the virus remains bound by a peculiar law of virology. The more lethal a pathogen is, the harder it often finds it to spread on a global scale. Because the Andes strain kills its host so quickly and so effectively, it frequently runs out of new victims before it can establish a massive chain of transmission. The latest scientific data regarding hantavirus activity suggests that we are seeing more frequent encounters as human activity encroaches further into NATU-RAL habitats, while the virus maintains a reproduction number, or R rate, of less than 1, meaning it lacks the explosive growth potential of the flu or recent global pandemics. It remains a high-consequence pathogen. An R rate below 1 tells us the outbreak will eventually burn itself out, but it offers little comfort to those already caught in its path. Scientists are currently focused on why this specific strain has developed the ability for limited human-to-human transmission and what environmental factors are triggering these clusters. This is a story of a deep, analytical struggle between human medicine and an ancient microscopic predator that has survived through the eons by being incredibly good at what it does. The current situation is a stark reminder that our historical battle with these invisible enemies is far from over, and that the biological portrait of hantavirus is one of a patient, persistent, and devastatingly effective killer. The MV Hondas continues its journey across the Atlantic, now navigating toward the Canary Islands under a cloud of intense international scrutiny and clinical observation. While the initial shock of the deaths on board has sent ripples through the travel industry and public health sectors, the immediate measures being taken are focused on precise containment and the monitoring of those still on board. The world is watching as health agencies track every individual who stepped off that vessel, from those who flew to Switzerland to those being treated in South Africa. The focus remains on the individuals directly affected and the specific circumstances of their exposure, as authorities work to ensure that this localized outbreak does not find a new foothold on land. It is a moment of high tension, but it is also a moment that demands a clear-eyed assessment of the facts over the rising tide of public anxiety. Public health officials, including experts from the World Health Organization and the CDC, are working to provide clarity amidst the growing noise of the digital age. The most critical takeaway from the current data is the specific nature of this virus and how it contrasts with our recent global experiences. We are not looking at a situation that justifies the mass masking of populations, the shutting down of businesses, or the keeping of children home from school. The Andes strain of hantavirus, while incredibly dangerous to the individual, requires a very specific set of circumstances to spread, namely prolonged and close quarters contact. Its reproduction rate remains below the threshold required for sustained, explosive community spread. The fear that this will transform into a new global pandemic is, according to all current evidence, unsupported. This is a contained event, tragic and lethal for those involved, but fundamentally different from the airborne threats that have previously reshaped our society. The path forward for the region, and for travelers worldwide, is one defined by fundamental hygiene and a renewed respect for environmental boundaries. The origin of this specific crisis serves as a stark reminder of how easily the line between human safety and natural danger can be crossed. A simple excursion to a bird-watching site became a catalyst for tragedy because of the invisible presence of animal waste. Protection starts with this basic knowledge, avoiding areas with high concentrations of rodent activity, and being mindful of the environments we enter. If you find yourself in regions where hantavirus is known to exist, the simple act of avoiding contact with animal droppings and being aware of early symptoms after potential exposure is your most powerful defense. We must treat the natural world with a healthy respect, acknowledging that even in our modern era, there are ancient risks that require our constant attention. As the situation on the MV Hondas eventually stabilizes, and the chain of transmission reaches its natural end, the warning it leaves behind remains permanent. We live in an interconnected world where a single breath in a remote corner of the globe can have consequence thousands of miles away. Vigilance is not a call for panic, but a vital necessity for personal and public safety. The enemy may be invisible, and its history may stretch back millennia, but our defense lies in our ability to remain calm, informed, and cautious. This report serves as a final reminder that your safety depends on a commitment to being aware of the world around you. In an age of constant information and hidden threats, staying alert and maintaining personal responsibility is the only way to ensure that the quiet danger of the wilderness does not become a personal tragedy. Your health and the safety of your community depends on this vigilance. News banner breaking news: Fatal Hantavirus outbreak confirmed abort MV Hondas Latins. Case 8 total 6. Confirmed Andes virus 2 probable. Death toll 3 fatalities reported since April 11. Crank position moored off Cape Verde. Transit to Canary Islands pending critical updates. Transmission: WHO confirms rare human-to-human spread of the Andes strain among passengers in close contact. Quarantine: CDC deploying specialized aircraft to repatriate 17 American passengers for mandatory isolation in Nebraska. Official stance: Maria Van Kerkhove dismisses pandemic fears, stating the public risk is low and the outbreak remains contained to the vessel. Warning: incubation period ranges from 1 to 8 weeks. Medical monitoring continues.